We'll start the. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Our speaker, I wanted to welcome Narissa Kamar, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And she's the project coordinator at Information Africa organisation based in Kenya. She oversees all projects, including the successful monthly e-workshops, Africa Transformative Knowledge Caravan, which started in July 2020 with 4 countries and is now at 22. And obviously COVID has had a huge impact on things. So I will now hand over to you, Narissa.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Sharon, for having me. And thank you, everyone. As far as my name is Narissa Kamar. Of course, I'm happy that you allowed us to share our caravan, the story of the caravan, as a best practice in Africa and a success story. And you've introduced me, Narissa, from Information Africa. Previously, I worked at the United Nations as an assistant librarian, and also earlier with the university as a research librarian. So I'm going to give a story about Africa. And we're calling it the Africa Management Transformative Caravan, Knowledge Management Transformative Caravan, which we've done, and we're basing it on what we want as Africa based on the Africa Agenda 2063. Basically, that's what we thought of as Africans. Of course, everybody was affected by Corona. When Corona landed, even us as Information Africa, with our programs, as I said, we do capacity building, we just went off. So by March, that was the first case for Corona. And then also it had an impact on all the programs, including worldwide, including Kenya. That included things on COVID protocols. Then by July 2020, we had to adapt to the new norm in Kenya, just like any other person, any other country. So we came up, this is now what formed the genesis of our, now the caravan, how we exchange knowledge. This is the genesis for us exchanging the knowledge. And with that, again, we had to impress the technology. So we had an option of the Zoom, the meetups, the channels of communication, etc. Then we decided to settle upon the Zoom. So that we came and moved all the discussions. Of course, we've been doing this online or physically, especially the knowledge management. This is what is starting here. We had to move it to the online discussions and virtual conferences, so that we could make sure that the professionals are sustained. Then 2020, the first meeting, about 22 participants from 4 countries, that's Kenya, Somaliland, South Africa, and Uganda. I said Somaliland, I think I mentioned to a few of you that Information Africa has a strong working relationship with Somaliland. By last month, we've been quite steady. Every month we meet. So by last month, if you count, we covered by 2022 months on 22nd, in April last month. And we covered 22 themes with 22 African countries. And you can notice that it cuts across from Central Africa, East Africa, North Africa, all West Africa, all parts of the continent. By now, we can close that 100 Africans have participated in the meeting. This is how it works. We schedule and host monthly workshops. And Africans are quite generous. They volunteer the expertise to share their first knowledge among colleagues. Expertise to share knowledge from the local and the international arena. And then we sort of address whatever we believe that is key to transforming lives of Africans and their citizens from a knowledge management perspective. So as they volunteer, what informs the next theme for the next month is what we pick from the discussions as what needs to be pursued as colleagues. So from there, we get usually, as we start off, just like you guys are doing, we roll off by having an icebreaker session, but as we take it 1 hour, the African way. So people introduce themselves, we come up with the icebreaker based on the theme of the month. So at times like last month, for example, we were discussing African foods. So you find that we ask every person from across the continent to share the best foods and how it's prepared, the traditional food. So that way, we sort of tend to see what cuts across Africa and what knowledge we need to sustain going forward. And what has been key for us is the role of information professionals, specifically and the knowledge managers, in ensuring that we simplify the information which we're discussing from the discussions and avail it for timely and relevant policies. And this has worked. From what I'm going to share, it's working because we're already seeing that what we've done as IPs has worked. So the other option also is that the other thing which works for us, which has been key in the caravan, is being how information professionals can observe and explore information flows within organizations. Because you notice most of these colleagues who share their knowledge, and all of us who work, we cut across various sectors in Africa. We find that there are colleagues who work in the academia. We've got colleagues who work in the non-governmental sector, and we've got colleagues who work in parastatals, and we also have students. So we have all sorts of people, and we want to see how we can bring together this knowledge to be shared among colleagues in Africa. So this is the key. And so far, those are the themes we've covered as Africans. We've discussed about indigenous knowledge, which I think is quite crucial for Africa. And we've also tied, as I'll be showing in a few, in the intellectual property, how the laws, how the intellectual properties, so that the patents, the corporate issues have been tied alongside the indigenous knowledge and any other knowledge. Then we also look at issues of knowledge management policies and the implementation. Of course, Africa, we're still behind in terms of knowledge management. It's to us, it looks like a new concept, but we want to get it from the perspective of Africa. How do you want to see this knowledge management as Africans? And of course, the environmental issues. Because when we talk about the knowledge management in Africa, we are looking at what is it? What is this? What is it? Environmental factors, the climate change, how was it affected? What indigenous knowledge we have, like the medicine, but the traditional medicine which you find within the environment, how has the environment affected? And this is what we've been discussing as part of the caravan, to link the environment to the knowledge management. Of course, issues of health community engagements, and we've moved all these plus sustainable development goals, or we link the sustainable development goals to the AU agenda and to Agenda 2030 and other blueprints documents within across different countries in Africa. Issues of language development agenda policies in Africa is one of the core themes we've been discussing because of language and how we sustain and share information in Africa. The other one is, the other core has been the African Agenda 2060 and the Sustainable Development Goals. This is about discussions as Africa. As Africa, we've looked at most of the blueprints which supports the future of Africa we want. We've basically looked at, apart from that, we've also looked at most of the countries, different countries in Africa and their general strategies, their policies, and basically their blueprints. So Africa Union 2063, the Africa we want, cuts across all the African countries as an African Union agenda. And it looks at how we can localize or process and enhance awareness of indigenous knowledge. Now, we only pick the elements which touch on the knowledge management as perspective. So it looks at the indigenous knowledge. The other thing which has been a basis of discussion is the Agenda 2030 for sustainable development. People-centered. 2030 is basically people-centered, apart from the other 5 Ps, but for us, we tend to move forward and capitalize on the people-centeredness. Prosperity, planet, partnership, and peace. And you notice that that also will tie, especially the issues of partnership, with Sustainable Development Goal number 17, which talks about partnerships and and related field. And of course, the SDGs, we look at all the 17 and try to see which target among the 169 targets linger or cut across what we require in knowledge management and what can actually meet the expectations of knowledge management and sustainability in the continent. The other one has been the issues of knowledge management and indigenous knowledge. The practical approach, which I've just said, like in the last meeting, the 22nd, it was quite interesting because we had to look at various foods in Africa, which you'll see shortly, and then how best can we retain this? Because we're looking at it in terms of them and how we can sustain the health perspectives and other bases coming from Kenya. Those Kenyans who've done the presentations have looked at the country's blueprints, such as the Vision 2030. And about the Vision 2030, it just links up again to what the African Agenda 2030 and the Agenda 2063 is. So it's just like we're building. And these are the core blueprint documents which Africans are based, which us as a caravan are based on discussions on. The caravan, based on the discussions, has also looked at how we can apply indigenous knowledge. Which areas can we apply indigenous knowledge in? We've looked at areas of agriculture, ecosystem, health medicine, conflict resolution, traditional attire, music, and education. Especially traditional attire for us. We are saying, at what point are we supposed to have our traditional attire in place? And at what point are we supposed to look like we're dressed in the Western formal? What is the traditional attire in relation to working environment, in relation to what is the start, what Africans want to see this thing, and in relation to how we sustain our culture based on the attire. And the music as a form of knowledge, passing knowledge and education as well, and the educational system and how best the educational system affects the continent and affect the growth of the continent. So how we've applied, so of course that is just the explanation, because then where is that transition, the contemporary society and transition of IK to modern knowledge? But we, as much as we're discussing this in Africa, we're of course interested in ensuring that the indigenous knowledge in Africa is sustained. We're interested in seeing that the indigenous communities in Africa transit and move to the knowledge so that we don't lose it. But we find there are quite a lot of challenges, because we notice that the issues of capturing, sharing, and validating IK in Africa is difficult. Why? Because Africa is not a documenting institution. Africa works on taboos. Africa works on family values. Africa works on ownership. So it becomes a problem because of those kind of challenges. So you have this knowledge in Africa, and you'd want to, the indigenous community, the specific indigenous community, for example, I'm talking about a community like my community, it has a knowledge, and within my community, that knowledge is owned by a family. So those are the problems, because we cannot translate it. And then issues of now education come in modern research and documentation and board. It becomes a whole issue for us to see that. The other big challenge has been the legal and policy frameworks which protect the preservation of IK and conservation of natural resource base. Natural resource base, because we've said, part of the IK of Africa and the richest part of IK for Africa is the medicine, traditional medicine, and the traditional foods. So when you have those two, what happens? When you have those two, what happens as a challenge? The legal and policy frameworks which protect. And we'll notice that shortly we'll see what countries have tried to do, especially with this corona, what they've done towards preservation of our indigenous knowledge. These are the basic realities which indigenous knowledge in Africa thrive on. There's limitation. There's a problem of language, and that's why we try to address the language issue in Africa. Most of the Africans, interestingly, we do a language and culture based on the European colonizers with an inferiority towards our own mother tongue. That has been a big issue. And that has affected the indigenous knowledge. Education is good. Having the culture of the European is good. And that's the question which I asked, like, at what point are we supposed to anticipate? And this is the question we've been asking. At what point are we supposed to embrace our traditional attire and own it up as our attire? Is it being influenced by the colonizer? So that we say, as Africans, that when you're going to, if you're doing a formal job, you're supposed to dress in a particular format of dressing. And that particular format of dressing sort of tends to move towards the European colonizer of that country. So you come to Kenya, we're colonized by the British, you want to dress the British way. You go to Angola, they're colonized by the Portuguese, they want to adopt the Portuguese way of dressing. You go to Tanzania, they want to dress like Germans. That is what we've been discussing. This is the realities, and it has affected how we do work with this indigenous knowledge. Of course, issues of exodus of Africans and the youth moving out of our continent, looking for other ways, has affected the indigenous knowledge. And geographically, not only the space to outside Africa, but also moving from the rural to urban. That kind of exodus movement has affected various ways of indigenous sustainability of indigenous knowledge. The same example of my community. Youth will move, and since I said that it's safeguarded, part of indigenous knowledge in Africa is taken as a family issue and it's safeguarded. So they move and we lose the inheritance, or we lose who to pass the knowledge to, because the youth have moved out of the geographical space to the community to the urban areas. Others have been moved to Australia. Some of my villagers are in your country. Most of them, I don't know what they're doing there. I don't know if they're sustaining their culture. The other day, I saw them doing part of indigenous knowledge in terms of circumcision, and they're putting it on YouTube, they're putting it on Facebook, on social media spaces. But then, if you came back to the community, it's something which is taken as sacred. It is very sacred, and you find it being shared. So these are part of what realities that's affecting us, and of course, issues of governance in Africa, which is characterized by continued dependence on the colonial master. And vis-a-vis all these and African narratives being told by others, our story being documented by other people. We've seen people who are interested in our stories coming. You see perhaps someone coming from a different country, call it the colonizing country, call it Africa, call it Europe, call it Asia. They come to sit in the community with the community members, they want to learn their language, and they want to document the story of Africa. Yet, Africans themselves are supposed to document their own story. So these are the basis of realities which you're trying to work as a transformative caravan to see how best can we help to get it back. In Africa, that is what the context of Africa, that's what culture is all about, rituals. The picture below there depicts rituals. That is one of the communities in Africa. That is communities in my country, Kenya. That is Maasai community. And that is part of their rituals. Rituals of manhood, rituals of transforming from youth, a child to a man, and how best you get that. Issues of behavior, issues of faith and religion. And this time we want to stick to African faith and religion. How does Africa behave in terms of religion? And if you look across Africa, we've been able to sample different religions, prayers from different countries. Others are facing south and they're praying. Others are facing a certain mountain and they're praying. Others are dressed in a different kind of attire for the prayer and the religion and the food. Issues of food, issues of art and drama and music as a way of sustaining indigenous knowledge, as a way of sharing knowledge among ourselves, attitudes of individuals, beliefs, the language and the custom. Of course, that is a definition of culture, which all of us have, to the other extreme, to the extreme right. But our interest is how. So we've been able as a caravan to look at the different cultures. We've been able as a caravan to look at how the West Africans perceive issues, how East Africans perceive issues, how do North Africans perceive issues, how do Central Africa perceive issues, revolving on this. And interestingly enough, you'll find that there are quite a lot of issues which cut across the continent. And this, for us as a caravan, this has been what we want to address, issues surrounding preservation of the African culture. And I've said, most of the African culture is verbal, it is oral, it is orally transmitted, it is not documented. But now we want to look at how do we access this information? These are the issues. It is orally transmitted, it is owned by individuals. How do we access this information? Issues of the denigration of African culture. It's eroding, we are losing a lot as Africans. How do we make sure that we retain this culture? And we want to see those of us who are sort of, let me call it literate, elites, documenting this. We want to see those of us in knowledge management who know the process of documentation of knowledge, who know the process of preservation of knowledge, who know the process of storage of knowledge, and who know the process of accessing the same knowledge, assisting the African setups, assisting their specific cultures to ensure that we retain this knowledge. Want to see how best as information professionals, as knowledge managers, we assist in say access to information. How do we then, and this is what we will see, we've got case studies where colleagues have managed to do this. How do we then get this information simplified, simplification of information, repackage the information to the right audience? And the other thing which is surrounding it is issues of Western education and socialization. As I've said, African youth have moved. They keep moving out of the geographical space. And of course, most Africans want to go to the West. We want to retain our Africans back to the system. We want to bring them back to this. Yeah, naturally, you'll discuss and say, perhaps there's an issue with the educational system. But then Africa should think about, as we discuss in the caravan, we say, we want to influence the government ministries of education to change the African systems, educational systems, to fit the requirements of the African culture. Because as the colonizer came in, they came with their educational systems, and we adopted the educational system as it is. Does it affect our culture? That's the question. Does it affect the preservation of African culture? Yes. How? Because one, West South Africa, they have this mode of dressing, especially the Zulus, they dress very interestingly, and they try to retain. And those who've lost the issues of dressing like Zulus, has it affected how they behave and preserve their culture back home? Yes. Issues of knowledge storage has been quite important, because then in the discussions in the caravan, we've said that Africans have been storing their knowledge in a different way. The storage, the owner, the tacit knowledge is being held by the owner. The owner of the knowledge has been the storer of the knowledge. But now, if the owner, that's the old man or the old woman who has the tacit knowledge it goes with the knowledge. Mm. So we're trying to see, how do we then store this knowledge? Can we work and we look for ways of coming up with explicit knowledge through documentation? Can we come up with repositories? And I'm happy because shortly I'll be showing you as an example of Namibia library, which they've done the restoration. They've gone to collect data from the knowledge storers. And this also boils down to the owners. This also boils down to the role of knowledge managers. In the caravan, we tried the much you can to break it down so that we start it from the bottom. Let's move it from the bottom and see how best you can influence our government, so that as much as we are looking about knowledge management, we also want to see how we can influence our educational systems, how we can influence policies. And we've seen in the caravan, the shared examples, people have been able to move, and we've seen governments have been able to sort of impress that. And also the issues of mode of transformation of transmission of African culture. I've said African culture, we learn through, most of it through music, through drama, In Africans, we love to sing. In Africa, we want to dance in a particular way, and that is transmission of culture. We dress the way I've dressed here, this on my head, because it's part of the culture of Africa, and this is what the discussions in the caravan has been based on. Of course, as African beliefs, that's what it is. And all Africans, according to this, one of our colleagues, her name is Aderonke, she's from Nigeria. She talked about the African ethics and beliefs in one of our meetings. But then what we need to emphasize and what we've been emphasizing, and we have taken it as a take home in the caravan where everybody has been tasked to go back to home, to their family, and implement. So we've said, one, can we look at the sets of values, emphasize on communal values? We're almost losing it. When I was growing up myself, there was a lot of communal activities, a lot of communal eating, but we're living with it's just we're losing, we keep losing this. So now all members of the caravan, we've given ourselves assignments to go back and emphasize on communal values. Of course, with change of everything else, but then we want to see what are these communal values which attracted and African ethics, as it were. And then also issues of family, homes and trainings. What is it? Why is it that family is almost running? We are losing families. And why are we losing families? Because of the basic traits we had have been lost. In Africa, because, and again, I've said it has been influenced by the Western kind of education, or the educational systems in place, not necessarily Western, we've seen that, and also the kind of harsh conditions and current life, we've seen that homes and families have left education and basic training to school systems. And that even, I'm sure it cuts across all continents. We've seen the effect in terms of you see what happens. People want to commit suicide, others, they've just totally lost direction. But then we're saying the caravan, take it back to the family. What is it that, where did we go wrong as a family? Of course, Africa is very hospitable. Hospitality in Africa is key. And that is part of what we want to retain back in Africa. We want Africa, which is hospitable across Africa. And I think that hospitality as managed is what has taken us to reach to about 22 Africans to discuss issues affecting us in the caravan. And issues of integrity and honesty, quite high in Kenya, respect for the elderly, hard work and devotion, justice, and the controversial one, the dress code. If I dress the African way, am I backward or am I retaining my culture? And this is what the caravan has been discussing, and we're happy that one of our colleagues at the Ronke assisted us to discuss this as Africans. And then, like there's a colleague from Kenya who's been discussing about intellectual property. And the all intellectual property in relation to the intellectual, in relation to indigenous knowledge as an intangible asset, because all of us know it is just knowledge, you pass it, it's knowledge, you can't touch, it's just something like you learn, you get the beliefs and move it on. We've sort of in Kenya that we've seen how the intellectual properties, those are the patents, the patenting, the trademarks, and the copyright issues. We've tried to see how best they can protect one, customary laws and cultural taboos. Because this is the core of indigenous knowledge, customary laws and cultural taboos in Africa. And it works because this links up to how we behave in Africa, links up to how Africans want to do things. It will link to our educational systems. Like now for Kenya, our educational system we're changing. We want to have it curriculum based. We want to see children doing what we used to do earlier. We want children to learn things which are not there before. And also the other thing which we want to protect is growing commercial shows that new policies and laws are needed. Of course, we are not static as Africa. We get to learn about the policies, we develop policies, but want to develop policies which are linked to our indigenous knowledge. and patents, trademarks, geographical indications, and trade secrets. We want this to be protected. An example was then during the COVID-19. Of course, all of us know about this, because then we wanted the property, the innovative ideas of generating new knowledge, technology, especially issues of indigenous communities, especially indigenous communities in terms of remedial medicine. And I'm glad because tomorrow in our 23rd meeting, we'll be discussing issues of medicine. We'll be discussing African medicine as an alternative way of health. And also, we're pushing to see how these things can be protected. Of course, during the COVID-19 pandemic, you notice that there was a new debate about copyright laws. And you notice that, of course, UNESCO by then, according to UNESCO, by the end of March 2020, at the height of the global lockdown, in excess of 1.5 billion learners in 193 countries were directly affected by the countrywide or localized closure of educational institutions. This created an opportunity on copyright. In Kenya, because of this now, in Kenya, for example, if you take an example of Kenya, then immediately after the corona, that was 2020, according to one of our colleagues, Kaindo, a senior lawyer, Kaindo Kiare, who's been part of this, he gave an example that during the period of COVID-19, the board, that is the Kenya Copyright Board, in collaboration with the collective management organization, came up with the rights management systems, which is an ICT solution that reduces physical contact in copyright management and licensing. So theirs was to ensure that work in the copyright sector is continuing, because every day we've got to copyright a new idea, we've got to patent a new idea, you've got to get a trademark for a new idea and related. And of the RMS, which is the rights management system, was incorporated 3 modules and enables the KICABO, now the Kenya Copyright Board, to enrich its data bank of others and their works. And of course, other attempts had been done earlier to protect this, and this was shared because we wanted to see, is this a best practice that can be borrowed by other countries? Is this a best practice which cuts across, is shared by Africa? Something like Nagoya Protocol in 2014 cuts across African and other countries. But then the Kenyan part in relation to the traditional knowledge, that the government of Kenya acknowledges that the traditional knowledge and cultural expressions is part of what is required in government. So it is in an act. We have an act in Kenya protecting that of 2016, which was amended in 2019. And this is the basis of us in the caravan to discuss how we'd want to see this knowledge move forward. And others also, the other attempt by Kenya was the new laws that ensures that knowledge is shared and used and the owners are adequately protected, recognized and remunerated for the knowledge and the work. And this is not only in Kenya, all countries, especially. We want to see that, with the corona, quite a lot of people came up with new ways of reaching out, new ways. Others had to come up with new music. Others came up with new poems to sustain their lives. Things just changed. You had to look for ways of doing these things in a different way. And then now, the IK, the indigenous knowledge and the IPs, that's the protection, intellectual property laws in Kenya now are to look for ways of protecting this so that people earn from that. And this still became part of the law, the work of the knowledge management sector to ensure that communities, the knowledge from the community is protected and the right people in the community own the right knowledge. They can earn from that knowledge they have. Or the patenting, for example, if you notice that a cutting from 2009 newspaper in Kenya, and they were talking about the piracy of the colonial, there's a circle there about the Western profits, getting the profits of African output going to those who are not really the owners. And if you look at that, if you discuss that in Kenya and even in Africa, you look at what information, what is this, especially the food and the local food and other issues which Africans do and end up being patented in other countries. For example, in Kenya, we have a basket which was being done, which is done by a local. It's unwoven, it is done by locals, but then you find that it is being patented in a different country. I think it's in Japan, we call it the chondo. So we lose. And then you see the crucial indigenous African items and objects like that, like this playing instrument, which this old man is using. The nyakiti, the one I've just circled down there in red. Natiti of the lower string instrument, which is being used by this. But we want to see, are we losing? Kenyans have lost a lot of money because of this. The reason is, we as Africans, not only in Kenya, we as Africans, the way our indigenous knowledge is that it is passed. And I've said the way it is that it is owned by the family. The way it is a taboo, it is a secrecy. So as they remain taboos and secrecies in Africa, any other person coming from any other world who does not believe in the Western world, let me call it the Western community, who does not believe in African taboos, will just come and take it and own it. They patent, they make profit out of it, and yet the owners are losing. So these are things which we discuss and see how best can we push the countries to assist Africans through that. The IK science, the question is does Africa need to revive this kind of IK science? And the IK science basically, we're looking at how best we preserve our oral tradition, like our proverbs or riddles or songs, our legend myths, etc. Because this has been forming part of the indigenous knowledge, which looks at creating, generating new knowledge and passing new knowledge for use, for sustainability of African cultures, for sustainability of countries, for sustainability of government in Africa. This is where it falls. The basis is that. Then also we're looking at them. So we need to look at this. How did we transfer these skills? Skills transfer. And with the inventory of issues now, can we document? Those of us who can document this, can we have these things documented? Can the communities benefit from this? Can we allow them to, can we introduce new skills? Can we introduce new technology to help them improve the production in terms of mass? We want to see them have mass production of this so that they get more and more profit. And of course, if you look at all that again, there are issues which I've said taboos in Africa. Africa looks at things, sustainability of IK in Africa. We're saying that there are issues which Africa also want to retain because of it looks at it comes down to things of mannerism, it comes down to things of communism, it comes down to issues of fidelity, it comes down to issues of foods and how foods are done and sustainability of the same. So one, for example, in Kenya, there's a committee says, you don't touch the ground while eating, you'll kill your mother. The whole issue is not actually touching the ground, but they want you to sit mannerism when you're eating. Table manners, those are part of African table manners. And the other one again was shaving an infant by its paternal grandmother because of genetic checkup. They want to see, does this child really belong to this family or they come from other families? And in Zimbabwe, for example, issues of shrines to preserve vegetables or public land. Those are now the indigenous vegetables of our interest in Africa. And these are the IK issues of Africa. And it further talks about, so when we have all these IK issues, what are we doing as information professionals, as knowledge managers? We then came and said, let's see a situation where we have an IK library or a section dedicated to IK in a library. Not necessarily a physical or a public library, but we still come up with our own libraries and say, let's create this space so that we record all these stories, the songs, and document, and then keep it for posterity. Want to make arrangements or patterns of items, want to see items which flow in Africa. We also want to look at norms and taboos. Where are we? Where are we going? And we're all linking this to remember the blueprints. I say, we are linking them to the blueprints of Africa, the Africa we want. Agenda 2063. We're looking at it in terms of how are we where do we overlap where does AU Agenda 2030 overlap with the Sustainable Development Goals, and where's the gap for Africa, and how can we fill this as Africans? And this forms part of the IK labor in Africa. And also the other issue is trade demonstrations with issues of pricing. Of course, we want to see what are we selling as Africa, and what is the cost? And of course, our naming patterns and ceremonies, this forms basis of most of the African ideas. Africa is multilingual and multicultural. You get this kind of diversity in Africa. Those are just examples. If you look at all of this, the continent, you get diversity. It gets down to the extreme left is South Africans, those Africans, how they dress as Africans. The next are Kenyans, Maasais, the other one are South Africans. And depending on the geographical area and the terrain, some Africans dress like those young men there, even in Kenya, the Turkanas, because it's hot and that's how the culture, they still retain their culture. This forms all the Africans here. Others, like West Africans, they will want to tie the hair like the head like that because it's an African way of doing things. And this is what we want. We want to go back to work like this from Monday to Friday. Am I being allowed to dress the way I want? Can I dress like the Maasai there in the middle and go to work without raising eyebrows as an African? Can I dress like the South African at the extreme end? And the multilingual issue. And of course, we talk about those multilingual issues. We notice that Africa is now thinking about moving to adopt, not actually, it has adopted Kiswahili as an African language. African Union says we need one language which defines Africa. So in 2004, they adopted Kiswahili as a language. And then in 2021, July, the UNESCO in 2021, UNESCO declared July 7th as Kiswahili Language Day. So this forms the basis of our richness. This should be a basis for richness in Africa, basis of rich heritage. And it's interesting by now, even though it was from 2004 to expect more than this, but then 12 African countries have accepted and speak the Kiswahili language now. And of course, issues of language, based on what I've said, is we have a lot of multilingualism as a norm in Africa. We have to identify language definition features in Africa. We've got language as instruments of power. We have all this. This is what defines Africa. But then with those cutting across quite a number of languages and different groups of Africa, others are losing. We've lost, we lose, we keep losing. Of course, because of issues of, say, intermarriages in Africa, we notice that most of the small tribes have gone, and that's why we need to document. Sorry, I'll use a lot of examples from Kenya because I'm a Kenyan. For example, we have a small tribe known as the Oki community. It's almost getting to this extinction. Naturally getting to extinction, but that's not what we want. We want to see, can we document? Can we document this? Can we document what they're doing? Then what can we borrow as a best practice? What can be cut across to the neighboring community, which is close to, which their practices and cultures almost are similar. This is where the interface cuts in Africa. Policy-driven factors, the political ideology. This is the monster in Africa. New government comes, they come with their own ideas. So start documenting, it comes a new government, they have this, they come with their different priorities. Policy-driven factors like power, issues of geographical arrangement. Can I adopt what is in West Africa and I'm in East Africa? This has been affecting it. Democratization of the party systems has affected a lot in terms of this. Human rights, including linguistic rights, and then sustainable development involvement in all social cultural groups. So this is the transfer of knowledge. We have the society, we have the environment, and we have the economy. This is what the interface which cuts across when you're discussing issues of indigenous knowledge in Africa. But still, this is not deterring any knowledge manager in achieving what you want. As long as you have the structures, the appropriate structures, then we're okay, we're good to go. Okay, in Africa, our colleagues, some of our colleagues have shared the best practice. we have Professor Matholo from South Africa. He already has a School of Heritage. It's known as Kara Heritage School in South Africa. And they're basically teaching colleagues or Africans on heritage issues. That is their primary business. Other countries have included indigenous knowledge in the educational systems, especially primary and higher schools. They're going back to mother tongues in school to teach in mother tongue. And this is a roadmap to Africa. And colleagues from across Africa have shared experiences. Nigeria is now teaching in Europa. It is accepted. Somaliland, they speak in Somali and they are teaching Somali. You get to Somaliland, you speak Somali. Of course, it's part of English. And all African countries, they want to try and see if they can bring back this. An example of South Africa, they have a lot of languages. And they've put it as part of mainstream in terms of education, and it is accepted. Then also this creation of a special IK section. And of course, the creation of IK section as a roadmap is Africa has taken advantage of their museums, the availability of their museums and their archives to create the IK section for sustainability. And development of IK maps and IK information codings. And you notice that most countries now, they have giving documentary talks about their foods and about their culture and medicine, and they're being aired. And this also in relation to the same, and especially in Kenya, and I'm sure in most of the African countries, especially like South Africa, because of multiplicity of languages, and Nigeria, you notice that most countries have accepted that we get different channels of television channels in different ethnic languages, so that they speak straight to the person, and that's part of the packaging of the knowledge to reach to their target audience. An example of a success story which has been shared and which the other members of caravans are taking is the documentation, what the library and the archives of Namibia is doing. One of our colleagues, Namotanya, who is the Deputy Director of Namibia, National Library and Archive Services, shared an experience. And all that these are pictures from what they've done, that in 2015, when they realized there's the need to document, they did an application to get funding from the government. And they had to, when you're doing it, you have to start small. So they had to move to communities which were ready to share their knowledge. I think after doing the awareness of the same, to say we want to document this, and those are the regions they moved to. And to date, they've documented 20 videos of maximum 17 minutes each on those communities. And what they're looking at, issues of indigenous food, drinks, utensils, and other activities of their living. Those are pictures of what they've done. This is part of what they've documented. You notice to the extreme right, the old lady there. If we lose that kind of art and skill, it's gone. So the documentation aspect, I'm sure they document how it's done, the type of fabric they use, the skill they use, and the output of the same. And still the question of increase in productivity. We want to see much of this in terms of increase of productivity. We want to see the cost going up, because the African indigenous knowledge is based on passion. It looks like it's passion because you get to learn when you're young. So it moves with passion, it moves with the activities of the community. Then in the process of passion and with the changing issues, then you notice that most of these African activities do not add a lot of value. And that is why we have discussed issues of intellectual property, so that we find these things patent to protect and to also help these people to get an income out of it. If you go to the website of Namibia Library or the preservenamibia.org, this is what you'll get. You'll get that this is what they preserved. There's if you just pick that and see that's how the website looks like, but these are the outputs. All the DVDs which they came out with have been distributed in libraries and archives within Namibia. And also the publications which they have in forms information in DVDs is to be made available in a book format. I don't know if my colleague is here, she'll confirm if they're finalized in the book format, but I'm thinking the last meeting they said they're still looking at that. And of course, all these come with challenges. They are the big challenge in terms, and this is not only a challenge for Namibia, this is a challenge for not only Africa, all of us. The tacit knowledge challenge of transferring tacit knowledge is just becoming a problem, especially in Africa because of taboos, because of ownership plans are owning it, and because also you cannot validate because it's somebody owns it. And also the issues of finances, like I'm sure our colleagues in Namibia would want to have documented more than that, but then issues of financing and scattered information, scattered knowledge in terms of, not only scattered knowledge in terms of scattered knowledge, but scattered knowledge in terms of who still has that knowledge. Most of the people we're looking at in Africa who has the real, let me call it hotline knowledge are the old. And we're losing, they're dying. The knowledge is scattered, you want to run. And if they're not dying, they're too old, they've lost memory. The memory is gone. You meet an old man, they have nothing to tell you, and they are the custodians of the knowledge. So sort of, we were losing a lot of knowledge. And this is what informs most of these activities in Africa, like the Namibia Library Archive Services, to decide, let's see how much you can document from before we go forward. And the other issue, the other examples which we've shared across was the case of the Kenya Forestry Research Institution. How they've managed to come up with a framework of knowledge management. Notice that it is not only about Indigenous knowledge in Africa. I think we just pride in Indigenous knowledge in Africa because then that is our win, that is our game in Africa. But we've also looked at what is it that we can share our knowledge as Africans across the continent and even worldwide. So we had one of our colleagues, Sheila, she's the head of knowledge management in Kenya Forest Research Institute, and she gave a practical approach on how they created a knowledge framework through management buy-in, selection, training committee, blah, blah, blah. But then they had a challenge. And the challenge is what now made them feel like, yeah, we needed to have documented this information. She shared an example with those fire which erased the old section. So that meant they lost the information. And she also shared an issue where there was flooding in the office. Those are natural issues, but then still knowledge was lost. And of course, other challenges which cut across all of us. I don't know if they're usually real or we see issues to do with. We don't have adequate human facility, we don't have adequate finances. We don't have adequate training, we don't have adequate sensitization about what it is. And change management has been an issue, not only for Africa, but across the world. When management changes, we lose them. And that's why we say, is it possible then that we as knowledge managers come up with strong knowledge management frameworks, which will wither the change management issues, which will protect and secure all the knowledge we have, regardless of what it is. And also issues of security of their data at Kenya Forestry Research Institute and information assets is a big issue. So this frameworks also this was guiding us to say, yeah, let's look at our different institutions. What has it done? Can we get this as a best practice? Is it possible for us to come up with a knowledge framework so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel as colleagues from across Africa in the caravan? We pick the best practice from each country and see. Of course, we have to map it to fit our needs as per our countries. The other case study is a transformation of agricultural enterprise through knowledge. And of course, Africa, all of us, we feel like Africa is an agricultural country, as much as we're saying 23% of sub-Saharan Africa GDP comes from agriculture, according to us, as at 2019. This still, we feel like is important for us as Africans. Then the question is, what is our role as information professionals in ensuring that the knowledge is shared from research to inform policy formulation and inform increase in productivity at all levels? Because then farmers in Africa And mostly in Africa, most of the farmers are based in the rural setup. So farmers, they need that information. And you notice that our role as information professionals is to repackage. What to repackage all this information to ensure that the farmer gets appropriate information so that the outputs get to the market, to the target market, and they get maximum income. The issues of farm outputs being repackaged, the issues of adding value chain addition is what now the role of information professional is, to ensure that the users get maximum profit. And the other issue also as a role of information professionals, which the Caravan discussed at length, based that most of the African countries represented in the Caravan are from agricultural perspective, it's been the issue of research information on appropriate varieties of outputs. And you'll notice that countries like Kenya, for example, which as the Kenya Agricultural Livestock Organization, have created data banks, so the gene banks, so that they have the appropriate technology to help the farmers improve their products, to help the farmers improve the variety of, say, some seeds. But then the question is this: do we retain the quality of the seed as it was? Do we retain the output, the value of that, say if it's a vegetable, the value of the vegetable as it was originally, with this research being inputted? And those have been dilemmas we've been looking at. So once we retain this original spinach as it was traditional one, or do we take this one, which the gene bank, as per government research institutions as produced, so that they increase productivity? But then what is the effect in terms of the content and the content in terms of affecting health issues of Africans? And then also the issue of farmers' response to information when it's given to them in the system, and also other cases relating to preservation of food, the feeding systems, the identification of medical plans, and the knowledge within, and especially the preservation of foods in Africa. We've seen change in the preservation of food. And has it affected the food securities and insecurities in Africa? Maybe yes, because why? Because depending on how you preserve the food, do we end up losing the food because of the kind of preservation methods? Because long time ago, you'd preserve food which would last up to about 2 years, depending on the ingredients, could have perhaps honey and storage in a format. But then we're saying, with this introduction of new research and the rest, are we losing the preservation of food? I get into food insecurity because of this kind of information. I've given that example of Kenya KALRO, the gene banks, and the research modification and sustainability. And this is what we're saying, that indigenous food cooking and storage in Africa would want to retain as was originally, so that we don't have to use the refrigerators. Let's go back to indigenous ways of storage. The other time we discussed about indigenous African food. And then we want to see if this food is contributing, is it reliable? Does it contribute to the sustainable development goals? The market forces, the demand supplies, the profits, the packaging, etc. This is African food. Very, very indigenous and very rich. And of course, apart from that, when COVID came, a colleague from Zimbabwe shared, that was Yuda Marwa, he shared about a plant which has been used. It's been common, but then it was used to cure COVID-19. It was used to treat COVID-19 and it was effective. So want to see, can Africa repackage this? Of course, it's repackaged. Can we sell it to the world? Can we test it and sell it to the world, so that we also have something coming out from Africa, and especially coming out from the indigenous part of the knowledge, the indigenous knowledge perspective, the medical, so that we sustain and give it out through Africa. Of course, cases where the same was tried. Madagascar tried, they said they've gotten this treatment, but I don't know how far it's sustained, how far it's reached. So also issues, so it takes us back to the role of research institutions in Africa and how knowledge managers can work with them to get to that. Those are usually hindering factors. I think I've talked a lot about the education and the early custodians of the knowledge, the protection of the intellectual property, and also the issues of prioritization of knowledge to be shared by everyone. And of course, our role as the caravan. Can we document this? We said yes. Our role, we've tasked each person from the country to come up with oral interviews so that they can document and move the tacit knowledge to explicit so that we retain it as it was originally. And notice that the issue of language is quite important, because as much as some of our colleagues from the caravan, the young, the students, and others who are even working, the less than 30s, the less than 40s, they don't know the indigenous language. They don't speak their original culture, their language, their local language. And we want to, and they are knowledge managers, and want to task them to take up an oral interview. And this has been an hindering factor. From Nigeria to Africa and to the world, Nigeria has been able to come up with black soap. They call it dudu osun, and this is done by women. They've been able to document, they make it, they have a recipe, which they pass through the families. But I think, according to the presenter, that was Aderoka again, they've been able, they're in the process, either they finished documenting or they're in the process of documenting this, so that they patterned the whole process of making this type of a soap, because I'm sure it's kind of a unique. And Nigeria also has just been fantastic in terms of retaining the traditional dress code from generation to generation. That one, the unwoven, it's been resilient. They call it aso okay. It's just a wonderful dress which they've retained in Nigeria, and it is worn by the Yoruba tribes in southwest Nigeria. So the question is, if we want to dress, can this be a formal dress as Africa? Can we adopt it? I mean, it's an African dress. Can we, when it says formally dress up so that you dress down, can this be the dress up, and then the dress down can be the Western kind of dressing? That's the question we've been asking ourselves, because what defines the Western kind of dressing up, and what defines formal or informal dressing in the setup of an African context? This is extremely beautiful, and we'd want to see much of this. The other question is, the other thing which we look at is the role of information professionals as knowledge managers and IP as exchange agents. And of course, we've based all this in the gaps which we have. Do African IPs have a sense of the essence or of community within which they provide professional services? This is what we've been asking ourselves. We've asked ourselves, what is it? What is it? We want to come up and see what are these gaps and what is our role as information professionals. We just don't want to retain the classroom kind of setup as information professionals, but we want to see how far can we take it to our communities. And also, the whole idea is, how can we as information professionals, and we're happy that Namibia also already is leading the direction, how can we help communities to curate their stories? How can we do that? And as much as we're saying, good, we have technology that can help us to document, we have technology that can help us to translate, etc. But then what is it that we have so that we retain without distorting that information on the cyberspace? We want to see how the role as curators to ensure that the indigenous communities and their languages are sustained. And no other person is doing this other than the knowledge managers. If we lose it, and of course, you find that in most cases, knowledge managers in Africa, especially knowledge management in Africa, they don't even know where to place it. They think, does it go to an IP? Does it go to human resource development? Does it go to ICT? No, it has to go to the information professional sector, because these are the people who know the issues of knowledge storage, knowledge capture, knowledge dissemination, knowledge repackaging, and knowledge, anything related to knowledge and dissemination. And then related to the same also, information literacy is quite important, and this is the role of IPs. Moving from the usual information literacy in terms of searching for information, we want information literacy which works with the indigenous communities. We want communities to understand that the content they own, the information they create, the social culture they have, the norms, the knowledge systems which are in place are supposed to be documented and they're valued to the community which owns. Because then this is the only thing which will define us as communities. And it is the role of us. So what move in the caravan, we say, let's take our role in the society. Let's go back and make sure that all the information which is created is documented for Africa and it is shared. And that is a big role. And of course, IPs must also help people to tell their own stories. What stories do you have? Tell people their stories. That's our role. And how do you tell the stories? By ensuring that anything which is documented is put on the repositories of the respective institutions. And I've shared the best practice up there. Why do we need to preserve in Africa? And this has actually been quite important when we're doing the discussion, because then we say a lot of our traditional knowledge is destroyed, is gone because of the destruction of the natural environment. Natural environment in Africa gives us basically medicine. African medicine is found within the natural environment. The natural environment gives us things like honey in Africa. So you get that pure honey from the natural environment, but when it's destroyed, we lose the traditional knowledge because of that. And this kind of, we end up destroying the indigenous and local communities embodying traditional lifestyles. So you'll find that those people who depend so much on gathering and hunting and honey are destroyed because we've destroyed the natural environment. And that's why we say, if we're conserving the traditional knowledge, we are influencing governments to conserve the natural environment, to retain the natural environment. And this has been the gospel, part of the gospel of the caravan. And also the other need is the cultural erosion. I think I talked a lot from the cultural erosion. The youth are just helping the agents of destruction of culture. And we want to see that all these youths and any other person embrace. Can we inculcate our traditional culture at a younger stage, at an early stage, like a younger age? That's what we're looking at. And of course, in this, the need for the conservation also, governments have not been left out. The national councils in governments, different governments, which have got experts in traditional knowledge have been put as part of ministries. They're governments. Like, I remember a colleague from Cameroon shared that they have a ministry of traditional something. I cannot quote this clearly, but they know in Cameroon, it was shared that there's a government and ministry on traditional knowledge. And this is what we want to see. These are the best practices which Africa has been picking from each other and sharing. The key outputs so far as a caravan, we've covered 22 themes. They said tomorrow we're doing the 23rd theme, and we meet every month, the last Wednesday of the month. And Africa has just been amazing. 22 African countries, plus 1,000 members participating, representing over 300 institutions. And the other key output is that, of course, before Corona, Information Africa was running a series of conferences. So we're supposed to have done the 4th one. So the other major output will be the 4th Africa Regional Conference on Knowledge Management. And we already have a theme, and the call of papers has been out, the African Indigenous Knowledge Management and Sustainability, Unearthing the Contemporary African Challenges. And these are based on the discussions of the 22 themes we've discussed. If you look at the sub-themes of the conference, they're all based on that. And since we're based in Kenya, we said, let's do Kenya. And since now it's an African caravan, we're hopeful that the caravan will move to perhaps West Africa the next year and the other years, South Africa, depending on which country is ready. Then in our discussions, we said, can we, after discussing all these African foods, can we come up with a recipe book? All Africans within the caravan we're happy about it, and the submissions of recipes are already ongoing. So our target with the recipe book is, let's have this recipe book and launch it during the November conference in Kenya. So we'll have sections for West Africa, sections for East Africa, etc. And Africa will help to use the recipe book to feed, to sustain and to eat the indigenous food, because you notice that some foods which you don't eat in Kenya that are available are eaten perhaps in South Africa. So the recipe book is what is going to help us. The other key output is we have a communique. We have a communique based on this, on the various discussions we've had. And we are also proposing that we come up with a database of traditional food from across Africa, which the initial part is coming up with the recipe book, and then also a proposed journal. Our journal for Africa is coming out soon. We already submitted to the registrar of companies in Kenya for approval. Of course, we're registering it from Kenya, but all the articles, most of the articles which we've been discussing, most of the key presentations will have to go to the journal. And of course, we're calling out for partners and sponsors, especially for any of that, either partners and sponsors for the conference, because we want to see as many Africans as possible attending the conference. We're also looking for partners and sponsors who were interested in the data creation, coming up with a database, traditional food database across Africa. And mostly that one we're looking at research institutions because of the data gene banks they have. And then in conclusion, this is to conclude, we're saying that as a caravan, the initiative for transforming through knowledge talks to most African government objectives of transforming lives of its people through policy change, investments in research and development, and promotion of technology. Then a deliberate link to have a response from this institution requires a formal strategy to engage for purpose of one, streamlining knowledge management in the organization, and secondly, to facilitate protection of intellectual property and innovations necessary for sustainable competitiveness and expansion. This requires both the finance and human resource to bring it together. And perhaps what I need to just mention is that this caravan has covered, we've cut across all sorts of Africans, from professors from university. In this slide here, you can see this is one of the government senators in Kenya, very influential. You can see we have very senior people across Africa joining, including students like Faith here, like Regina, and including very senior people. And we have people who've dedicated themselves to help very senior Africans, including Dr. George in Kenya, Dr. Jama of Somaliland, and Dr. Erin of Nigeria, plus our own Professor Abdurrazak, who is based in Vienna. And they've been helping us to shape this. And that's how we have fun in Africa. That's how we have fun when we have meetings, we greet one another, and we're happy as Africans, and we keep discussing what we want to do. But bottom line, apart from the happiness, is we want to see the outputs being rolled out. And we're happy that already 2 or 3 of the outputs which I've shared have been achieved. And want to achieve this and want to move the caravan across Africa. Those are my contacts on behalf of the caravan and the colleagues in the caravan in the house. I want to say thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you,
the moderator.
Thank you, Nerissa. I'm just conscious of the time and that people may need to go. There were a few questions. Did anyone still have any that hadn't been covered off? I think you had one, Catherine, regarding funding.
I just want to thank you very much. It's a really fabulous initiative, Nerissa, and so important for that knowledge to be captured by the African community themselves, to do it well. The only way it should really be done by the actual community themselves. But I'm interested in who's funding the work to date. And there seems to be many avenues that the work can continue in, and who are you thinking about funding in the future?
Which one are you asking about, the caravan or the individual best practices?
Start with the caravan.
The caravan does not have quite a funding as it is. of course we started to say let's let colleagues contribute about $15. But with the corona, it's almost impossible for people to contribute the $15.
Yes, yes.
So it's just, so we said, let's just move it to Africa and see. And especially the speakers, they volunteer, they say, okay, let's share knowledge across Africa and see what we can share with the rest of us. So rarely do we get people fund this, but we do it and say, let's just push and see. Perhaps one day, maybe the Australian knowledge management will fund it.
I was thinking for the caravan, have you interacted with the Knowledge Management for Development group?
Not quite. KMB.
So that may, KM for Dev. Only because they've got a large initiative on Indigenous knowledge. And I don't know the funds they have available, but they may know of different organizations that might have funds. But that'd be a key one, because it seems like it's what everyone wants is, supporting countries. And as you're saying, like with regard to the culture, the food is great, but then also as other areas. So I specialize in water, sanitation and hygiene. I've worked in Somalia and Kenya, so I've got some knowledge of the region, but only as an outsider. But then there's avenues also of getting Indigenous knowledge around these areas that you may be able to get funding from organizations that are actually looking at a specific area, like FAO, Food and Agricultural Organization, looks at livelihoods. They may be interested in Indigenous knowledge around agriculture and may be willing to give you a grant or funding, because they'd probably love to be able to get specific knowledge, and you can have your stipulation with regard to encouraging that the person who gives that knowledge has to be credited with that, with sharing that knowledge. But I mean, you're the one actually collecting it and you're actually funded for it, because it seems like a fabulous initiative that you're starting. Just want to make sure that you get those funds to keep going.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
I've noted here.
All right, in that case,
I do have, can I have another question then?
Go for it.
I'm fascinated how you actually manage a meeting with over 1,000 participants from 22 countries. I'm interested in the language that you hold the meeting in, and how you actually facilitate a meeting with so many people, to have, and the screenshots that you showed had people being very engaged. If you have too many people will get bored. You obviously have a nice mechanism to be able to engage people throughout it. How do you actually run these meetings?
Thank you. Of course, let's talk about 1,000 plus. It's not like they turn up 1,000 every month. Okay. They turn up like 50, 30. So we've been adding up the numbers. And we do it in English. And why we retain ourselves is because of saying how we start, when you allow every member to introduce themselves, they sort of blend into the meeting and they own the meeting. And because the discussions are usually very engaging and lively, you find all the Africans in the house just wanting more and more, because they're willing. Africa is a culture of sharing. People want to share, people want to learn from each other, people want to implement. So that's what has been keeping us. And I welcome you to join us tomorrow to see the level of strength in Africa. If you have the time, you can join us. And I may ask some of my colleagues if they want to comment. You can see I have about this Kenya, this Nigeria, and this Ethiopia. I don't know if they want to add on something to that. Any person from Kenya? Yeah.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Australia, for that. It's quite a hectic thing to really hold 22 countries together. But the binding thing is that desire to have knowledge shared across the continent. We have problems, and we believe we also have solutions within ourselves. And without much of funding, we do fund most of our own activities from our own initiatives, and we find pleasure in it, a lot of pleasure in it. So if we get some partners, sure, yeah, but we are determined. And the language is also an issue, but partly why we also want to have that, what Narissa talked about, the physical meetings, to have those binding things more binding, physically meeting, then discussing those issues face to face with the people who are within the caravan. Thank you very much. That is what I think is what is binding us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'll just stop the recording.